And joining me now is the former Deputy Attorney General under President Trump, Rod Rosenstein. The newly appointed special counsel and looking into Biden, Robert Hur, served as Rosenstein's top aide at the Justice Department, overseeing the special counsel investigation into the Russian election interference. Mr. Rosenstein, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Chuck.
In December, after the appointment of the Trump special counsel, when asked whether you would have done it, you said you probably wouldn't have. How about this Biden special counsel?
I think, Chuck, having made the appointment in the Trump case, Merrick Garland put himself in a position where he really had no choice when this matter came along, unless the preliminary inquiry were to establish that there was no chance that a crime had been committed. And according to what we've heard, John Lausch did not make that decision.
Do you believe that appointing a special counsel strengthens the Trump special counsel and strengthens their ability to come to different conclusions, or does it muddy the waters? I
think, Chuck, you have to differentiate between the political consequences and the practical consequences for the special counsel. For Jack Smith and Rob Hur, they're conducting independent investigations. They're going to go evaluate the facts and the law, make their recommendation based upon what they find. So I don't anticipate that the existence of two special counsels is going to influence the way either one of them goes about their job.
To the public, it appears, one, I had somebody use this metaphor with me, and I want to use it. There are two car wrecks. One clearly is an accident. One appears to be intentional. Is that a fair way to look at these two classified document situations?
I think, Chuck, we should wait until we know the facts. You know, the key fact with regard to the Biden documents, of course, is what did the president know about those documents? Was he aware that they'd been moved? Did he, in any case, in the past 5 years, has he handled those documents? Was he aware of them? We just don't know that yet. So I think given that, we really can't speculate just based on what's in the public record.
Tell me your confidence level in Jack Smith and in Robert Hur.
Well, these are two professionals who spent extended amounts of time in the Department of Justice. They understand that their goal is to focus on the facts and the law and apply department policy. And both of these men are not going to be influenced by political pressure.
You feel like they're both, you said something intriguing to me. You said, you know, every special counsel starts with sterling credentials, and then the public gets a hold of them. But would you say that's the case with both of these gentlemen?
It's certainly true of these gentlemen, as it was with people like Ken Starr and Bob Mueller, that you pick people with sterling reputations who are known for being nonpartisan, but you're in a political arena where it's inevitable you're going to be attacked.
There's two sort of unique defenses in each of these cases that I'm curious your take on. One is Donald Trump's claim that he could declassify anything he wanted. Now, he's not made a legal claim that he did that. And the second is Joe Biden's currently president. So is it currently illegal for him to have classified documents in his possession, even if it's at his home next to his Corvette?
Right. Well, that's one of the questions the special counsel will have to look into. And in addition, you know, the legal status of the vice president, whether or not he has authority to make any declassification decisions. But the key question, the threshold question here is going to be, was President Biden aware of those classified documents?
And how does that get proven? You think he's going to have to sit for an interview?
Well, that would be a logical step. If I were conducting this investigation, I'd want to go right to the source and ask the president directly whether or not he was aware of those documents.
How a sitting president can't be indicted according to Justice Department. So let's say something is found. What would happen?
You know, Chuck, I think what should happen in a special counsel investigation is that the special counsel should evaluate the facts and the law, look at Department of Justice policies, and make a recommendation to the Attorney General about whether or not prosecution is warranted. Then it's up to the Attorney General to make the decision whether to apply that DOJ policy.
All right. If you have been in this similar situation, it's November 4th. It's 4 days before the elections. The National Archives informs you that, hey, there's the Biden, President Biden has just turned over some classified documents that he had in his possession. Is it too close to the election to tell people? Is that why the Justice Department didn't inform folks publicly? Is it too soon? Are there questions that should be raised about this or not?
Chuck, it's not the Justice Department's job to make public announcements like that. The decision about whether or not to go public would be left to the president and the White House. So I would not anticipate the Justice Department under any circumstances to make a public announcement about something like that.
You wouldn't have done that in that similar situation?
In the Justice Department, I would not have publicized it, no.
I am curious. There's a lot of new committees on the Hill that want to investigate some Justice Department practices. And some of these aren't for current investigations. You essentially said, no, when you were there and others, you didn't turn stuff over to Congress in active investigations. Do you expect Merrick Garland to do the same?
I think the bright line, Chuck, is not to turn over anything that's going to in any way interfere with the investigation. And so that's a decision the department needs to make in addressing each request as it comes along. There are legitimate congressional oversight requirements that the department can accommodate, but there really is a bright line when it comes to anything that might interfere with the investigation.
So the fact that they have already sent letters demanding certain things now, in your mind, there's nothing justice can do until they're done with this investigation, correct?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, there are, as I said, legitimate oversight issues that can be resolved without interfering with the investigation. So, for example, one bright line would be investigating the prosecutor while the case is ongoing. I think that's the place where the department would need to draw a line.
Let's go back in time. In hindsight, was doing special counsels, is this the slippery slope that many previous attorneys generals has always feared, that once you appoint one, you essentially can't stop appointing them? Once you claim there's a rationale of a perception of unfairness, aren't you stuck basically appointing them throughout the rest of the term?
That was true, Chuck, under the independent counsel statute, where there was actually a statutory obligation to appoint an independent counsel. It's not true under the special counsel guidelines. It's always left to the discretion of the Attorney General to decide whether the public interest warrants it in that particular case. So I do think when you've got a similar case, as you do with the Trump and Biden documents, that you have established a precedent. But I don't know that you need to apply that universally.
I asked that because a decision was made last year not to appoint a special counsel in the Hunter Biden investigation. But now he has appointed a special counsel to look into Joe Biden and these classified documents. Merrick Garland made the decision to put both January 6th and the classified documents under the umbrella of one special counsel. Is he going to be forced to do the same thing with Hunter Biden?
Well, I think you need to distinguish Hunter Biden from President Biden. We don't know whether that Hunter Biden case implicates the president in any wrongdoing. If it did, I think Merrick Garland would need to make that decision. But as long as it's just about Hunter Biden, I don't think that decision point will be reached.
There's a lot of criticism on Capitol Hill of the FBI. You work pretty closely with Christopher Wray. What say you about Christopher Wray?
I think Christopher Wray is doing a superb job under very challenging circumstances. This criticism of the FBI has been ongoing for some time. But if you look at the work the Bureau is doing on a day-to-day basis, I think the American people should have confidence in what they're doing. And I think Chris Wray is the right person to be in that job now.
Judging by our political climate of the last decade, do we have to figure out another way to politically appoint members of the Justice Department? Or do you think we can get through this moment?
I don't think there's any reason to mess with the appointment process, Chuck. The majority of employees of the department are career employees. The leadership is subject to political appointment, and I think that that's an appropriate way to manage the department.
All right. Rod Rosenstein, former Deputy Attorney General who's seen his share of special counsels and has been through this. Appreciate you coming on and lending your perspective.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.